Hello, it's David Allen and you are watching Sporting Icons.
So King Kong Luiz Ortiz, 6'4", southpaw. Officially, he's 42 years old, but according to his former amateur coach, add 10 years to that. So that's somebody with a bit of inside information. Now, Luiz Ortiz, as an amateur, he had over 350 amateur fights. Okay, he never really achieved anything, as in he never won a world championship. He never even qualified for the Olympics or anything like that. But when he turned pro, he came with a big reputation, as many Cubans do. But like most Cubans do, unfortunately, when they turn pro, is that they don't really do too much in the professional game. Don't get me wrong, there are a couple of standout stars like a Rigondeaux and a couple of others. But for the most part, they carry a reputation because they're Cuban, and Cubans are known to be good amateurs. But as pros, they don't really do it. And Luiz Ortiz kind of fits in that category right now. Now, when you look at Luiz Ortiz's career, and we're not going to talk about the PEDs or anything like that, but if you were to look at his career, what is it that he's really done? What is it that he should be doing now that he isn't doing? And we're going to cover all that. So before he got his world title fight with Deontay Wilder, the first time that he really kind of like stepped up, arguably stepped up, before then, but of course we'll talk about that in a second. So who did he really fight? Now, he was made a bit of a career of fighting extreme journeymen, such as Monty Barrett. A lot of you will remember the name Monty Barrett. This is the kind of guy that Luiz Ortiz was fighting, and way past it. Monty Barrett, for so many journeymen with like 18 losses, 25 losses, 8 losses, 9 losses, and whatever else. But his first kind of, I suppose, step up was in 2015. And we're talking 5.5 years ago when he fought Bryant Jennings. Bryant Jennings, of course, did have a loss on his resume at that point, which happened in the fight right before it when he lost to Vladimir Klitschko. Luiz Ortiz did a better job on Bryant Jennings than Vladimir Klitschko did. But since that moment, what's he really done? Who's he for? Because that was a good win for him at the time. And being a southpaw fighter, you're not going to be the most called out person on the planet, are you? Okay, people don't really like fighting southpaws. But since the Bryant Jennings fight back in 2015, he then fought Tony Thompson, who was he 46 years old at the time? Had multiple losses in that himself. And it took him 6 rounds to get rid of him. Still, a win's a win. Then he took on Malik Scott. And this was on a Matchroom show, by the way. And he took on Malik Scott, a guy who got knocked smooth out by Derek Chisora. Then he got knocked out by Deontay Wilder, officially knocked out, but the reality is, if you look at it in slow-mo, Malik Scott winked at Deontay Wilder, put his gloves up to his head, Wilder punched his gloves, and he went down like he'd been shot. Malik Scott, the guy who is now apparently the replacement for Mark Breland in Deontay Wilder's camp. That Malik Scott. And either way, he went the distance with Malik Scott. Malik Scott did run around the ring, and he made Luiz Ortiz look terrible. In the fight after then, which was his second fight on Matchroom and final fight on Matchroom against Dave Allen, a prospect, a guy who took the fight on very short notice for, I believe, for about 10 grand. I think Dave Allen got paid. Not much at all. Dave Allen, who of course had already lost to Dillian White, but he was 1 second away from going into the final round. So would Dave Allen be his second biggest win so far? Maybe. But then he took on journeyman Daniel Martz. He's pretty much the punching bag for most people coming up. But then he did get his opportunity and fought Deontay Wilder. Now, a lot of you will remember this because this is pretty much when I not long had started my YouTube channel. And I remember doing videos on this one where Luiz Ortiz, he wanted the Anthony Joshua fight. He was a WBA mandatory, okay? But Anthony Joshua fighting Vladimir Klitschko and had beaten Vladimir Klitschko to unify the belt. So he got the WBA belt in addition to his IBF belt. But when you're a unified champion, you always go with the oldest mandatory first. So the IBF mandatory was up next. At the time, it's Kubrat Pulev. Then, of course, it was changed with Carlos Takam. Then Luiz Ortiz was going to be next. But Luiz Ortiz didn't want to be next. He wanted, or didn't want to have to wait. He wanted his title shot now. He wanted to jump ahead of the IBF mandatory because he was WBA mandatory before the IBF called it. But because Joshua already had the IBF, that's pretty much what the rules were, and the WBA agreed. He tried to get Anthony Joshua stripped of the WBA belt because he'd already agreed to go fight Deontay Wilder. okay? And he wanted Anthony Joshua stripped so then he could walk to the ring as WBA champion, Wilder's WBC champion, seen as a unification. Didn't quite work out for him. He made the wrong decision. Went for Deontay Wilder. Put on a great fight. That was a very good fight. I enjoyed that fight. He did get dropped in round number 5 himself, and ultimately twice and stopped in round number 10. But up to that point, he was doing very well. He was lacing Wilder up, wasn't he? In round number 7, he had Wilder out of there, didn't he? But he did put on a very, very good performance. But rather than capitalise on that, he went and fought Razvan Kajanu, a guy who had already lost to Joseph Parker beforehand and a couple of other guys. But that wasn't the kind of opponent that you want to see Luiz Ortiz in. Then he took on Travis Kaufman. This fight was on the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury undercard. And the reason that he fought Travis Kaufman was because he wanted to fight on the Fury Wilder Part 1 undercard in Los Angeles, when he had the offer from Dillian Whyte to fight him as a pay-per-view headliner instead of the Derek Chisora rematch. Again, all the receipts for this, he wanted to fight on the undercard instead of fighting on pay-per-view against Dillian Whyte. Why don't people talk about that? I have no idea, but it is what it is. Then he took on Christian Hammer, who already had 5 losses at that point, went the distance with him and won on points. Then he got a rematch with Deontay Wilder, a fight that nobody was really asking for. Personally, I think if the rematch was to happen, it should have happened straight after the first one due to the controversy and that surrounding certain situations. But again, he laced up Wilder for all 7 of those rounds. And towards the end of round number 7, he switches off and gets caught with a big punch right in the forehead. And he's done, okay? But again, rather than capitalise and fight somebody good, he takes on Alexander Flores, a guy who, in my opinion, dived against Luiz Ortiz. He was waiting for any old punch to connect so he can go down and not get back up. And they actually withheld his purse. I don't know whether or not he's actually got his purse back since, but they actually withhold his purse for what looked to be a dive, didn't they? So when you look at Luiz Ortiz's resume, he hasn't really done anything, is he? Not since Brian Jennings in 2015. 5.5 years ago, he hasn't done anything. Now, people may say, well, because he's a boogeyman and people don't... No, that's actually a myth, the boogeyman. Do you know who came up with that? Tyson Fury came up with that when he beat Vladimir Klitschko. He said, oh, I want to fight Luiz Ortiz, stuff that he's a southpaw, he's too strong for me, he's like the boogeyman. And he was laughing about it, but people want to use that to suit their narrative by calling him the boogeyman. It was Tyson Fury who started there as a joke. Okay, but this is Luiz Ortiz, who's turned down, as I said before, Dillian Whyte, on more than that one occasion, by the way. He's turned down $7 million from Anthony Joshua. He's turned down multiple fights. He even turned down Shannon Briggs. Now, the only real time that somebody really called him out where he went, okay, let's do it, was Joe Joyce. And Joe Joyce went, forget it, and changed his mind. Okay? But other than that, Luiz Ortiz doesn't fight anybody. He just doesn't do it. So for me, I want to see Luiz Ortiz in there with some of the top guys around. If he wants to continue, then he needs to be fighting some of the top guys around. Personally, I'd like to see him take on Alexander Povetkin. The loser retires. Winner goes on and maybe challenges one of the other top guys out there. Luiz Ortiz versus Alexander Povetkin. That'd be an interesting one. Or maybe Luiz Ortiz will take on the winner of Derek Chisora and Joseph Parker. That'd be an interesting fight, wouldn't it? But point is, I don't want to see Luiz Ortiz taking on any more of these Razvan Kajanus and Travis Kaufmans and Alexander Flores and that of the world. I don't want to see this anymore. He's too old to be doing that now. Time to get serious. In fact, time to get serious was probably several years ago, but he needs to really get serious now. I don't want to see these kind of fights. When you talk on Alexander Flores, that was the main event, by the way. The main event. I mean, I don't understand why Andy Ruiz Jr. is taking on Chris Arreola. I mean, I understand it's an all Mexican-American clash, but Andy Ruiz Jr. should be fighting Luiz Ortiz. Should he not? I want to see that. I want to see Luiz Ortiz take on, I have no idea what's happening with Big Baby Jarrell Miller now. Fight him, if he's still going to be around. Take on Adam Kalnacki. I know Adam Kalnacki, apparently he's supposed to have that rematch with Robert Helenius. No idea what's happening with that. It's an in-house PBC fight. Have that fight. Take on a prospect who's across the pond there now, in F.A. Jagba. Take on your fellow Cuban in Frank Sanchez. I don't want to be seeing Luiz Ortiz taking on any more journeymen or anything like that. I'm tired of the narratives surrounding Luiz Ortiz. I'm tired of them now. He should have stepped up and shown us what he's about a long time ago. Not just do it because there's a world title on the line. You should be doing it anyway. You should be doing it anyway. Other heavyweights out there risking it. Why is Luiz Ortiz not doing it? For me, time to justify your ranking, especially within the Ring magazine, of being number 4. You need to earn it. Stop pussyfooting around and fight somebody worth a beat. Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you on the next video.